Hello to everyone out there listening. This is Gavin from Subtle Inversion, and this is a behind-the-scenes featurette on the Kaleidoscope album. So I'm sure there's at least a few of you out there wondering, why now? Kaleidoscope was released 5 years ago, so why do a featurette on it now? This is actually something that I wanted to do back when the album was originally released. It was going to be a piece of exclusive content in the members-only area of our website, but for one reason or another, it just kept getting postponed, and then it never ended up happening. As I was thinking back over a lot of these ideas and things that I've wanted to do over the years, I basically decided that I'd rather see them happen at some point than never at all. So I hope you find it interesting and insightful and that you enjoy. And here we go. So there are a few things that I wanted to mention about the project overall, or the album as a whole, before we started looking at individual songs. The first thing is that Subtle Inversion was originally conceived to be a strictly electronic project. The pop rock influences didn't creep in until well into writing, and only because I felt that many of the songs simply weren't as effective without them. I did play around with electronic versions of songs like Undone and Days, but it seemed like the energy just kind of got sucked out of them in those versions, without the guitar and drums and bass and everything. And at one point I just decided, okay, so this isn't going to be strictly electronic. That's okay. Let's let the songs kind of be what they are supposed to be, or what I felt they were supposed to be, and not sacrifice the quality overall and the effectiveness of the songs, the writing and everything. The second thing is, I found it to be a very, very interesting and eye-opening experience to write lyrics for somebody else to sing. Even though a lot of these songs are based on personal experiences or things that I was feeling at the time, I knew that Luca was going to be the voice for them. So I basically had to frame everything using her kind of perspective and personality and with her audience in mind. And that proved to be a very interesting challenge. It was something that kind of pushed my comfort zones to a large extent, because I hadn't done a lot of that before. I did one song that was for a friend of mine's wedding way back in the day, and that was the last time that I had ever written anything for anyone else. My writing is usually either for me to sing or it's instrumental. The last thing is, and I can't believe I actually did this, looking back on it, I ended up going back and remixing the entire album from scratch right before its release. We were set to release the album at Enemy North in Toronto in 2010, in May, the end of May. And I think it was during that month that I was playing back the mixes and masters and everything, and something just didn't click with me. It just didn't sound like what I thought it should sound like. And I was faced with this decision of, okay, do we blow the release date and go back to the drawing board and redo this whole thing, or do I release it and try and live with the fact that maybe it's not everything that I thought it would be or could be or should be? And it was a tough decision, but I'm glad I went the way that I did with it, which was to scrap the mixes and start all over. And when I say start all over, I literally mean all the faders got set back to zero, everything got pulled out, everything got redone from the beginning as if it was a brand new recording. It was kind of the only way for me to get a fresh perspective on what I was doing. And I had learned a lot mixing it the first time and was able to kind of parlay that knowledge into some better techniques and decisions the second time. And the album actually finally did come out towards the end of July. But like I said, it's something that, it was a tough decision at the time, but I really don't regret it in hindsight. I don't think I would have been able to listen to it now and not felt that twinge of regret that, I should have gone back and done what I knew I had to do at the time. So Voice was actually the last song to be written for the album, even though it's the lead-off track. I remember tweaking with the lyrics for this right up until the time we were starting to mix. And it was really because I was having a hard time conveying the meaning of the song effectively. This is a song that's about finding inner strength and standing up for who you are and not giving into the pressure to be somebody else. And I think as a lyricist, historically, being direct has not been my forte. I tend to try and find interesting, more obtuse ways of saying something instead of just saying it. And this is one of those cases where what I needed to do is just come out and say it. And I finally got to that point, I think, eventually, after kind of going back over many revisions and stuff. And I'm happy with the way it came out. But it was one of those songs that I knew it was going to be the lead song for a while. So I had this kind of place reserved for it. It was like, okay, voice is that lead song. I don't know what the lyrics are yet. I had the music kind of more or less fleshed out. But there's a lot of pressure to come up with, to deliver, basically, to come up with something that really started the album off on a very, very strong note. And I think that's why I was so adamant about getting it right. There wasn't a lot of room for being ambiguous or for not hitting the mark on that, because it's the first thing you hear when you put in the disc. So Disconnect is about how security can actually become a prison sometimes. It's about letting go of a situation that may have worked at one time, but that you've since outgrown, and that you come to realize is actually prohibiting you from growing and realizing your true potential. And, the chorus basically says, I've got to move on, I've got to leave this and prove to myself that I can handle life or a different situation on my own, that I'm strong enough to do that. Thankfully, this was not one of the songs that I struggled with arrangement-wise. It was always electronic, and I think it actually works really well that way. It's a fun little number, but there's a deeper meaning. The lyrics are kind of very serious and thought-provoking underneath the facade of this kind of fun, up-tempo, little jaunty electronic song. Spark was not only one of the first songs I wrote for Kaleidoscope, it was also one of two songs that I used as a demo for Krypton Future Media. Krypton is Luca's parent company. They're also responsible for some of the more popular Japanese Vocaloids like Hatsune Miku. My original intention was to get Kaleidoscope released as an official Megadina Luca album. Even though that didn't end up happening in the end, they were absolutely fantastic to deal with. We were going back and forth about it for some time, and they just decided it wasn't maybe the right move at that point in time. But one of the big selling features or marketing angles for this was it would have been one of the, if not the first all-English Vocaloid albums. Prior to Luca, like Hatsune Miku was phenomenally popular, but she only sang in Japanese. So that was one of the things that I always kind of had in focus for Subtle Inversion is, hey, let's make Vocaloid albums that American audiences can enjoy the lyrics on, that are in English, that'll bring this music and these singers to, an audience that may not have been as amenable or is able to enjoy the music entirely because the language barrier was there. This song is basically about realizing that you have all the answers inside yourself, that they're not all out there somewhere. This is also something that kind of resonates with me in a particularly powerful way because I think I've struggled with that realization for a very long time. You tend to look outside yourself, whether it's to external approval from people that you trust or that you love, or to quote unquote authorities, whether they're via books or they're in the form of just public figures or whoever, for answers in your life, without really looking inside yourself and trusting that your intuition is there. You're yourself. Maybe the answer is inside, and you're not aware of it. Gossamer was also one of the first tracks I started writing for Kaleidoscope, and it was the second song on the Krypton Future Media demo. The original name for this was Lacewing. I'm not sure exactly where that title came from. It just kind of hit me one day, and it stuck because I knew the song was about how outer fragility and beauty can mask inner stability and strength, and I thought it was appropriate. And then I remember looking up the meaning of it at one point and realized that it's a type of insect that apparently can emit a very foul odor. So I decided it would probably be wise to change the title, and it became Gossamer. However, the original chorus is still there in the form of the instrumental lead-in and break sections. You can basically hear how the original title might have laid over that. This one also features lyrics written in the second and third person. It switches between the verses where she's basically telling about someone that she knows to the pre-chorus and chorus where she's addressing a you, either a specific you or a general kind of audience you. I did that because I didn't want every song on this album to be conveyed from the first person's point of view, where she's simply just telling you how she feels or telling you what she's going through, that kind of thing. Here she's actually talking about somebody else that embodies these characteristics. Ghost. Nice dark relationship song here. It's basically about wanting to let go of someone that's not in your life anymore, but not being able to. Trying to kind of get away from their memory and leave everything behind and mend your heart. But then seeing all these reminders of them everywhere you go and being forced to kind of confront the fact that you're no longer with them. I wrote this song kind of backwards in a way. Instead of coming up with an idea or a topic and then developing the lyrics around that and coming up with a song title based on that, I had this song title and I basically said, okay, the song's called Ghost. What's it about? And then I started going through some different options and eventually settled on this whole relationship angle. But I think it ends up working out really well. The music is kind of slightly mysterious and haunting in a way. And, I think it pairs well with it. So the title track for Kaleidoscope ended up being one of the hardest songs to write for it. I chose this title for the entire album because I felt that it represented all the different pieces or songs that it contained. There's songs about relationships and escapism and nostalgia, and there's philosophical musings. It kind of covers a lot of different things. So no matter what little segment of the album that you're listening to or looking at, it's going to show you a little different facet. For the song, I knew I wanted the music to be very fun and energetic and, something that just puts you in a good mood when you listen to it. The song is about how your perspective determines your reality and how by shifting your viewpoint just a slight amount, you can radically change what you see in the world and how you experience it. So maybe you're able to find beauty in places that you never could before, or understand something in a way that you couldn't before. It has a lot to do with how changeable, life is, basically. So on the surface, this song sounds kind of fun and throwaway and, very, very happy and poppy. But underneath that, I think there's this more serious kind of message about, life and how you interact with it. Undone was officially the song that I gave up not trying to use guitars and bass and drums and all that kind of stuff on this album with. I tried to take it in more of an electronic direction, and the energy just fell out. I mean, it needs that drive, that drums and guitar thing that goes on. It's also a song that I kind of issued a challenge to myself on this one. I wanted to write a love song that didn't use the word love, that kind of portrayed it and described it more from the standpoint of somebody who's never felt those things before, that's completely caught off guard, and that maybe doesn't want to feel in love, that doesn't want to be in love, maybe because they fear it, maybe because there's a certain stigma that they associate with it, that kind of thing. But that's what this song is. It's basically talking about all these different feelings and experiences and thoughts and all these crazy things that are happening that this person is so unused to that it doesn't seem like them, and trying to make sense of all of that. So as far as my goal of not using the word love in this song at all goes, sadly, I have to say I fell a little bit short. You may hear it breeze by if you're listening in the very, very first line of the song. Although I did try my best to not use it at all, I simply couldn't find a clear way to reference the concept without at least calling it that. But here's why I think I'm okay with that. I realized after I thought about it again that my goal was actually to not have the singer use the term in reference to what they were experiencing. I didn't want to write a song where the singer says, "Oh, I love you," or "I realize I love you," or "This must be love." They have no idea what they're going through, or maybe they just refuse to admit what they're going through, what they're experiencing. Either way, I think that's kind of the bigger issue, and that's the part of it that I did manage to accomplish. The singer describes all these feelings and experiences without putting a label on any of it. Want is my anti-entitlement song for this album, and I wrote it for or about myself as much as anyone else out there. It's so easy to fall into the trap of believing that if you want something, that thing should simply be given to you. And unfortunately, that's just not the way it works. The song's basically saying, okay, you've got these great big dreams and plans and aspirations and all that you say mean the world to you. Well, what are you going to do to get them? Simply wanting them isn't enough, so are you going to give something up to have them? And that's often what's required. That's the nature of sacrifice, is you're often required to give up something that means just as much to you, if not more so, to have this other thing that you're after. And yeah, it's an unfortunate trade-off, but more often than not, that's what's required. It would be great if we could all just want everything and have it handed to us, but unfortunately, that's not the reality of things. I also think that kind of hard work and sacrifice is what leads to a deeper sense of meaning and accomplishment. If you've really, really worked hard for something, or if you've given something up that meant a lot to you, chances are that whatever you gave it up for is going to mean a lot more to you than if you had simply just been handed it by somebody. Binary is one of those deep in the album tracks that I really, really just still love to this day. My tendency as a songwriter from the music side of things used to be to want to add everything in the kitchen sink into a song. I'd come up with a synth riff, for example, and I was convinced that it was the coolest thing I'd written, so it had to go in, of course. And then I'd come up with a guitar riff, and it didn't matter if the two worked together or not within that song. They both had to go in because they were both really cool. And I think as a result, my songs ended up sounding really, really busy and cluttered, and there was no space for anything to kind of breathe and serve a purpose on its own. This song was a very, very conscious effort to get away from that. Lyrically, this song is about the idea that relationships are always comprised of individuals, that no matter how close you might feel to someone, no matter how many interests you might share with them, no matter how on the same page you might be regarding certain things, there are always going to be differences, always things that you might argue about, always things that you don't see eye to eye on, because you're two different people. There's two different sets of beliefs at work, two different worldviews, two different sets of life experiences, different goals, different dreams. I think there's this romanticized idea that the ideal couple never argues and always agrees, and I just don't think that's realistic because of this fact. Okay, so I'll admit I'm a total sucker for nostalgia. I tend to lapse into that mode more often than I would care to. Days is 110% pure nostalgia. It's basically just looking back on the good old days, of youth, and wishing you can relive all of that because, you thought it was just such a better time, whether it actually is or not. I remember reading an article about the Victorian era and how people tend to perceive it as this idealized Gilded Age where, it was all about manners and high society and everything. And there's this whole aspect of, with like child labor and social inequality and, cities were typically very, very dirty, unhealthy places to live. But all of that, none of that has any place in this glorified image of the Victorian era. People just want to focus on the lovely dresses and the great manners and everything. It's just nostalgia. It's not wanting to let go of what's in the past and wanting to kind of go back and relive it. It's just a fun kind of a summary song, Dive is another song that I remember spending just inordinate amounts of time on lyrically. Musically, the song is very dreamy and atmospheric, and it's about how the singer has this place, whether real or imagined, where they can kind of run off to and escape for a while whenever life gets to be a little much, and kind of, recharge and regain their perspective. And the challenge with this was to be specific enough with some of the imagery, but not be too specific. I wanted to allow the listener to kind of fill in a lot of their own details, but yet suggest things and kind of give them the groundwork to paint a picture in their minds. So you've got lines about like the pool of crystal tears, but then there's other lines that talk more generally about things like stillness and being finally free and feeling the solace washing over you, where you can kind of decide, what does that feel like to you? What does that mean to you? What picture comes to mind with that? I think it's a wonderful way to wrap up the album. I kind of knew early on that I was going to end this with something slower, just because of the nature of the rest of the material. It's generally an up-tempo album, and I thought, well, a good way to end it would be to kind of bring the whole thing down and kind of leave it in a way that just, lets you kind of go out peacefully. So I was really happy with the way this one came out. Thanks so much for taking the time out to listen. I hope it was educational and interesting. For more information, please visit our website at www.subtleinversion.com, and we'll talk to you soon.